Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for December 14, 2025. Today, we're talking with a member of the Armenian Parliament from Hayastan Dashink, the Armenia Alliance, Arthur Khachatryan. Hello, Mr. Khachatryan. Welcome back to the Groong podcast.
Hello, it's a pleasure being with you guys.
Ողջույն, Mr. Khachatryan. Let's start our discussion with the obscene, I would say, flirtation that the Pashinyan regime is currently engaged in with the West, and at the same time enjoying Russian tolerance, for lack of a, that's a mild word that I'm using. Last week, Pashinyan flew to Germany on an official visit, followed by a working visit to Russia for a EA-EU meeting, I believe. In Germany, Pashinyan had a number of meetings with German leaders. Mostly it was protocol. It included meetings with Merz, Steinmeier. He visited the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and even met the, and I'm going to use quotes heavily here, Armenian community representatives of Hamburg. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz described the process as a historic opportunity for Armenia's EU path and even a model for other regions. Taking into account that US officials link peace with connectivity, especially east-west connectivity. So as part of the trip deal, the Merz statement seems to reinforce a narrative that peace, EU alignment, and transport corridors are now treated as a single package by Western partners. What was the point of the Pashinyan visit to Germany, and what's in it for Germany and what's in it for Armenia?
Well, I wouldn't separate Germany from the European Union.
Yes.
Today, when the antagonism or hostility between the European Union and Russia has reached its apogee, maybe since the Cold War, obviously the West policy will be dictated towards creating extra headache for the Russians. And that's why we see that Western Europe supports, promotes all kind of statements that say that any country, in this particular case Armenia, drifts away from the European Union. So Pashinyan manages to be in good relations, let me say it this way, both with European Union and with Russia, because obviously when you say my goal is joining EU, then saying but leaving Eurasian Economic Union is not my goal sends conflicting messages, but both messages please respectively the Western Europe and the Russian Federation. I was surprised to hear that Armenia's model is it can be a model. Armenia's path can be a model for strengthening a countries and the European Union's cooperation, because so far the model was Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia. We see what's going on in Georgia, what happened in Georgia, the change of the course. We saw the elections in Moldova, and we saw what's happening in Ukraine. Now, everything seems to be clear with European Union because, again, anything that causes or may cause a slight headache for the Russians will be welcomed. If I were the Western Union, I would do exactly the same. Exactly the same. Now, why Russia feels okay with Pashinyan? That needs a little bit more or thorough analysis, because we see that we didn't see and we haven't seen anything from 2020 showing that Russia is not happy with Pashinyan. Of course, we've seen on the level of Maria Zakharova, but not on a higher level. Imagine if someone else was in Pashinyan's office, for instance, was in Prime Minister's office, then someone will try to counterbalance the pressure from Azerbaijan, will try to find a mediator to ask Azerbaijan to loosen the saddles and will go to Putin's office. Obviously, because today, even though there are some issues between Russia and Azerbaijan, Russia and Turkey, nevertheless, Russian Federation can be the country that has leverage on Azerbaijan. And the President Putin will face a dilemma, okay, to turn down the request from Armenia or to try to press or persuade Azerbaijan not to behave. Does Russia need that today? Obviously no. Obviously no. They depend a lot on Azerbaijan, though recently they managed to send their trains from Russia to Iran, bypassing Azerbaijan, and now they build this Volgodonsk channel, trying to bypass Azerbaijan. But nevertheless, they still depend on Azerbaijan. They still depend very much on Turkey. So they have to tolerate Azerbaijan. This means they can always justify their inactivity with policies of the government of Armenia. So this is why Pashinyan is the best candidate for Putin as well.
We recently interviewed an expert in oil, energy, and water and so forth to talk about Venezuela. And he hinted that there might be some kind of a grand agreement between the United States and Russia in division of spheres of influence. And the US wants Russia, Iran out of South America in exchange for concessions that the US will give to Russia in Ukraine and elsewhere. So we were wondering, I mean, maybe this is speculation, but do you think that the Caucasus, one way or another, is up also on that table?
Well,
And
absolutely.
who wants it more, Russia or United States? Because with TRIP, we're seeing signals that the US is interested.
Well, US is interested. Obviously, Russia is interested, Iran is interested, and European Union is interested. But the US, Russia, and Western Union are global players, so they do not look at the map; they look at the globe. So for a concession in South America, Russians may ask for something anywhere in the world. Northern from the Arctic Cycle, in Africa, in the Far East, in Caucasus, in Central Asia. So I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes evident that Caucasus, the value of Caucasus without Central Asia is not that big. So I wouldn't be surprised if one day we see a leakage or any sort of information that Caucasus is on the negotiation table. And this actually can be one of the reasons why there is controversy between European Union and the United States. It's not only Ukraine, but it's also southern eastern borders of the European Union. But I really don't know who will get a concession for what. So obviously, the attacks on tankers show that Mr. Trump is wants to strengthen his position in the in South America. Because like a few years ago, like about 10 years ago, we saw that Russia tried to return back to the Pacific Ocean, to Atlantic Ocean, excuse me, with having a naval base in Venezuela.
So on the topic of the EU integration, you correctly stated, and I'm quoting Pashinyan, he said, leaving the Eurasian Economic Union, EAU, is not Armenia's goal, but EU membership is. Given that these two alliances are effectively mutually exclusive, does this essentially mean
Absolutely.
that Armenia essentially is willing to leave the EAU if it is offered essentially EU membership? And how realistic is Armenia's prospect to join the EU? We talked about it many times, but Pashinyan is setting the agenda, so we have to ask the question: how is just looking at the map, Turkey is not part of the EU yet. It has been trying to be part of the EU since the 1980s. Georgia is definitely not, ready yet. So how is Armenia going to jump over Turkey and Georgia and join the EU, if those two, am I missing something here? Maybe they have figured out a way to teleport, matter across,
Well, I think that both EU and Armenia realize that they understand that Armenia's membership in EU is not realistic, at least in the foreseeable future. Armenia doesn't satisfy the criteria, right? All the criteria to for EU membership. Other than that, you correctly mentioned about the map, the eastern border of the European Union and Armenia, thousands of miles. Plus, there is Turkey in the pecking order, Ukraine, Moldova. I think one or two Balkan states are still there. But again, Europe in this situation, when they are at war with Russia or a proxy war, call it whatever you want, they would like to see a government in this part of the world that can create headaches for Russia. And Russia is more or less okay, quiet, as long as there is no capital damage to Russian interests in this part of the world. And so far, there hasn't been any capital damage to Russian interests in this part of the world. You mentioned the corridor that would link Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan. Okay, so there is a phrase, mutual benefits. Armenia allows Azerbaijan to pass unhindered from Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan and the other way. Instead, it gets other privileges, other benefits. So what are these benefits? So far, we haven't seen any signal that Azerbaijan is going to reoperate Sadar-Yeras railway, or Azerbaijan thinks about opening up direct communication between Armenia and Azerbaijan, neither railway nor automobile. Instead, they allowed transit for grain from Kazakhstan through Azerbaijan, then Georgia and Armenia, and also it allowed Russians to use its territory for transit of grain from Russia to Azerbaijan, then to Georgia. Basically, what does it mean? Okay, Armenia gets transit from Azerbaijan, against corridor that it provides to Azerbaijan, but the originator of the transit of the cargo is Russia. So proper functioning of trip depends a lot on Russia, if not 100%, because we understand that buying grain from Kazakhstan can be pricey, can be really pricey. So economically, it doesn't make sense in the long term or in substantial quantities. So I can understand when government subsidizes part of imports, when government uses its links, its connections with Georgia, asking them not to charge transit tariffs for a single cargo from Azerbaijan, but in the long run, this cannot be sustainable. So it's a paradox,
it's like
okay?
putting lipsticks on a pig.
Yeah, so basically it's really a paradox, okay? By the trip, the West, the US tries to kick out Russia from this region, but the functionality of the trip depends on the goodwill of Russia. And let me remind, okay, Pashinyan deliberately allowed Azerbaijan to conquer Artsakh, not to implement the requirement of the 9th point of 10th of the trilateral statement, ceasefire statement of 10th of November 2020, that says that Armenia allows Azerbaijan to travel from Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan and vice versa. It ensures the safety, and Russia, guarantees the security of the transportation. So to kick Russians out, Pashinyan deliberately allowed Azerbaijan to ethnically cleanse and to occupy Artsakh. But today we see the situation. And it's not surprising that out of all ministers, Minister of Economy is particularly cautious when he speaks about Russia-Armenia relations because he understands what a heavy blow it will be for Armenia if a black cat runs between Armenia and Russia, even though he's deputy chair of Civil Contract Party.
So just today, Arat Mirzoyan was in Brussels. The agenda, when published by the EU Council of EU Foreign Affairs Council, didn't mention Armenia in any part of the agenda, but it said there will be an informal exchange over breakfast with the foreign minister of Armenia, Arat Mirzoyan. The topic of the informal exchange was not listed in the agenda, but the Latvian Foreign Ministry leaked that this was about Armenia's 2026 June elections. Later, I believe EU officials also confirmed that they had discussions about the June elections. So I want to ask you, besides having probably a very nice breakfast at the expense of EU taxpayers, what did Mirzoyan get from this informal meeting? We know that Kaya Kallas last week or the week before that had requested that Armenia join anti-Russia sanctions. Is that also on the table? And yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on these developments and what is the EU doing? I mean, we understand Moldova, right? You know, Moldova was in a different class because Moldova is a candidate for EU. And it gets a lot of funding for the Armenia is not even doesn't even have candidate status, and here is the EU talking about supporting, or fighting hybrid warfare against Russia. What are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, I think Mirzoyan didn't enjoy the breakfast because, as you correctly mentioned, the voices from European Union that demand Armenia to take a tougher position against Russia are becoming more and louder and louder. And we had warned Pashinyan that his policy will yield to a situation when he had to choose either or, because though this party says that the foreign policy is balanced and is getting balanced, it's interesting, balanced and becoming even more balanced. Nevertheless, now Europeans basically will ask him to decide because supporting Armenia against what? What did they get tangible from this support? Well, of course, Armenia hasn't received anything close to 2.6 billion in assistance in aid promised by Mr. Charles Michel back in 21. But nevertheless, we see at least political support. And I think during this nice breakfast, the EU officials would ask the Armenian government to decide. If Armenia's government decides to show that it's truly a democratic country with European aspirations, basically meaning that they are going to try to diminish the Russians' influence in this region, then European Union will do everything possible to ensure Pashinyan's victory in the elections. And this basically means looking at Armenia's elections with eyes wide shut. Because what Pashinyan does is just beyond imagination. Incriminating Archbishop Artsakh Khachatryan for planting drug into someone's pocket in June 2018. You know, this is not funny.
It's silly. It's absolutely silly.
It's silly and it's cynical. It's just disgusting. And starting a criminal case against Artsakh Sarpazan just based on the testimony from someone who is Pashinyan's ally, and using pretrial detention without and even prohibiting visits to Artsakh Sarpazan. And when we see that, and we didn't see or listen anything from Brussels, or from main European capitals, uh, this is not acceptable. And when we meet with the European officials, I always quote Martin Luther King. At the end of the day, we will not remember the silence of our, no, the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So by supporting Pashinyan in the long run, European bureaucracy in Brussels ventures completely distorting the relations between Armenia and Europe.
Yeah. Arthur, Pashinyan flew directly from Germany to Russia for a Eurasian Economic Union meeting, and Deputy Prime Minister Overchuk said that some Russian companies have become wary of doing business with Armenia. He pointed to the sharp drop in trade turnover between the two countries from 24 to 25. I mean, 2024 to 2025. It's gone down from $12.5 billion essentially to $6 billion. He also said that Armenia's EU membership, which we talked about, is incompatible with the Eurasian Economic Union, and we heard Pashinyan himself acknowledge that. Can you explain a little bit what does Russian companies being wary of doing business with Armenia mean? Are Russian businesses no longer trusting Armenian companies as business partners? And is Armenia considered not a reliable member in the Eurasian Economic Union?
Well, first of all, this refers to the Armenian government's attempt to seize the electric grid. This is a Russian company, Russian capital, though owned by ethnic Armenia, by Samuel Karapetyan, but it's a huge investment from the Russian businessman. And now we see the government wants to seize that business, even though there is a clear warning from arbitration court in Stockholm. So this is one. Second, I'm repeating myself, but that's happening it's happening what that exactly warned against. West and Russia one day will not tolerate playing on two strings and will say Armenia to decide. It goes to West or it goes to North. We've heard calls from European Union recently. Okay, join the sanctions against Russia if you want to be member of the European family. And we heard once again from Russia saying that you cannot simultaneously be in European Union than Eurasian Economic Union. These are speaking statistics. These are or probability theory. These are mutually exclusive events. So it's not surprising that Pashinyan flew directly from Germany to Russia, trying to persuade the Russian authorities that Armenia is not planning to leave Eurasian Economic Union, because we understand that one of the reasons why Russia
Let me put it in slightly different terms. Right now, Russia, I think, has bigger fish to fry, so they're a little busy. At what point do you think Armenia will have no choice but to make a choice which way it goes? How long are the two poles going to allow Armenia to do all this fence sitting and hedging
well,
its
I think we
bets,
understand
etc.?
that the Armenia's fate is decided in Ukraine. It decided in Ukraine, okay? When the war in Ukraine finishes and when the party, the US and Russia, come to a deal that satisfies both parties, then I think Russia will seriously look at to South. And by the way, okay, if the deal pleases Russia, then Armenia will see a tougher pressure from Russia. If the deal is in favor of Ukraine, then we'll see a harder pressure from Europe. So that's why I'm saying, okay, it's Armenia's fate is being decided in Ukraine.
Arthur, Pashinyan's clash with the Armenian Church. It has shifted narratives several times, and we've been chronicling it on our podcast. But he first claimed that the Catholicos violated his own vow of celibacy, saying he was speaking as a concerned private citizen who, by the way, is using NSS agents to terrorize bishops. Then he escalated the rhetoric and portrayed the Catholicos as a foreign agent, literally accusing the Catholicos of providing reports to the KGB or the Russian FSB. Days later, Pashinyan reframed the issue again, and that's last week, arguing that the Catholicos had promised in 2011 to reform church canon law, but had failed to do so. And on that basis, Pashinyan last week presented a government-driven, quote-unquote, reform roadmap. The proposal calls for Catholicos Garagintu to resign, the appointment of a caretaker vicar, the drafting of a new canon law that would restrict clergy from political life. It also includes state-style vetting of clergy, a tax refund scheme, government-provided social benefits for the clergy. I'm assuming this is to sweeten the deal for the traitor clergy who joined Pashinyan. The process would conclude with the election of a new Catholicos under these new laws. Shall we call this the Armenian Pashistolic Church, if I may be, so blunt? But what are your impressions about Pashinyan's intentions, the dynamics and the evolution of those intentions, this whole commotion against the church, and his latest proposal?
Look, his anti-church campaign has passed through several stages, as you correctly mentioned. So about a month and a half ago, he says, we shall find someone, a married priest, kahana, to be a caretaker, and then have the elections of Catholicos. Now he says, we have to follow the canons of the church. So we have to nominate a bishop as a caretaker because we are defectors from the higher ranks of the church. But that's not actually, his point is not that. His major goal is to control the church, because church is one of the pan-Armenian institutes that obviously doesn't like Pashinyan's policy. And plus, they're one of the institutes who says that the issue of Artsakh is unclosed, and the people of Artsakh have the right for a collective and safe return to their homes in Artsakh. So Pashinyan started his campaign against the church right on the next day when His Holiness participating in the Swiss Peace Initiative in Switzerland to address this issue. And it was immediately followed after the instruction that Pashinyan received from Pashazadeh in Azerbaijan. What happened? Okay, he tried to discredit the church first. Okay, he accused one of the bishops. It turned out later on he gave the name that it's Artsakh Sarpazan, with having, all these affairs with his uncle's wife and so on, that there's no justification, but instead it was a gross violation of privacy. And it was disgusting, and I'm surprised that the Europeans tolerate that without raising any concern. If this happened in the Europe, I assume what's going to happen. Pashinyan, remember his last statement, and we see that in several churches, okay? Having the flag in the church, playing Armenia's national anthem before the morning service. So Pashinyan wants to transform his own conflict with the church, his own attacks against the church, as a conflict between the state and the church. And obviously, he will say that the church cannot be against the state. So this sounds beautiful because no one can say, no, we don't want Armenian flag in front of the church. We don't want Armenian anthem to be played anywhere. But the core idea is to contradict, okay, to say that church and the state, not himself, the state itself, cannot have antagonistic relations. Because remember, several times referring to King Pop, saying that, Armenia's kingdom was on its rise, and the church, and the church killed King Pop. So basically, church gets stronger when the secular authorities when the kings become weaker, so it's in the church's interest to have a weak state to be powerful instead. Okay, so now I will say I want church to obey to the secular authorities, to the government. Obviously, this means that he needs to control the church, because again, church is one of the institutes. First, it enjoys very high support from the public, and second, at least on Artsakh issue, at least on genocide issue, at least on pan-Armenian issues, the church's position differs from the position of Pashinyan. So this is the issue. And of course, he wants to discredit, and then to control. That's a whole
How is
issue.
this? How is any of this constitutional? What constitutional ground does Pashinyan have to stand on?
Oh, this is a very good question, because the clergyman, as anyone, can participate in the political life of the country. They are citizens, and no government can forbid a citizen to express their position on the government's policies. Okay, church itself is separated from the government, but this doesn't mean that the clergy, like anyone, okay, like farmers, cobblers, scientists, artists, they can express their position and participate in political lives, actively or passively going to the polling station. Okay, so when Catholicos as a citizen says that the issue we cannot have the Artsakh page closed, doesn't mean that church as an institute tries to control the secular authorities. But when Pashinyan, as the prime minister, speaks about reforming the church, pretending that he is Martin Luther, this means gross violation of the constitution. When he attacked Armenian electric grids, okay, this immediately sends signals to, especially to the Western countries, that, okay, the government tries to expropriate private property, private investments, and we see net outflow of foreign direct investment. So to shut the voices from the West, he says, I'm trying to diminish Russia's influence in Armenia. And immediately we've seen that the voices, the concerns that, okay, the government cannot just expropriate the private property, the volume went down. Now, to prevent the West and Western churches from saying that you cannot behave like that against the church, he says the church is under the Russia's influence. But if this was true, there would be at least one single case, not in court, but at least one single case at the investigative committee saying that a clergyman is a Russian spy. But the signal is, okay, we want to diminish the Russia's influence in Armenia. That is why shut your eyes, close your ears, close your mouth, and we'll clean Armenia from Russia's influence. This is the name of the game.
Arthur, I want to talk a little bit more about the right of Artsakh Armenians to return to their homeland. I don't want to rehash all of the concessions that Pashinyan has made over the last 5 years. Basically, we went from 2019 to 2023, we went from Artsakh is Armenia to Artsakh is Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan hasn't stopped this narrative of Western Azerbaijanis who want to, quote unquote, return to Armenia from the 90s on. And there's even a group in Baku at this point that is sanctioned by Aliyev and trying to participate in European conclaves to talk about this. Now, there is the issue, of course, of Azerbaijan forcibly removing almost 500,000 Armenians from its own cities, Baku, Sumgait, Shahumyan, and of course in 2023, complete ethnic cleansing. This is recognized by genocide scholars that this was a classic ethnic cleansing of 150,000 Armenians. But interestingly, there's nothing back from Armenia. He never talks about it. In fact, Pashinyan says that even talking about this issue is a national security threat. Interestingly, this past week in Germany, he so-called offered that Azerbaijan should drop its Western Azerbaijan narrative and Armenia would stop talking about Artsakh's right of return. How can Pashinyan offer to Aliyev something that he doesn't have, the right to drop the rights of the Artsakh Armenians? Let me just say, Armenia, to me, Armenia was just a guarantor of the security of Artsakh Armenians. And we saw what happens when Pashinyan abdicated from that role and he blew it, ethnic cleansing. He doesn't have the right to represent them, as far as I understand.
Well, true. I agree with you absolutely. Remember back in 2018 when he became the prime minister, his first trip was to Stepanakert. In Stepanakert, he said, Artsakh has to participate in the negotiations. I don't have the right to represent the people of Artsakh because the people of Artsakh haven't voted for me. Of course, it's a very good justification, but in reality, it was a attempt, or that was a direct challenge to the Minsk Group co-chairs, and it was aimed at torpedoing the negotiations in the framework of under the auspices of Minsk Group co-chairs. But he said several times, I haven't been, the people of Artsakh haven't authorized me to represent them. They haven't voted for me. I do not have any link to Artsakh. But and you correctly mentioned that Armenia's mission in this issue in Artsakh Azerbaijan conflict was guaranteeing the security of the people of Artsakh and leveling the bargaining powers of Armenians and then the Azeris. So today, Pashinyan's, or not today, but 2 days ago, Pashinyan's statement was very, very, very dangerous. He put on the same level the historical reality Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, a homeland of Armenians for a few thousand years, an objective reality, a historical fact, a historical formation, political and administrative formation. He compared Republic of Karabakh, Artsakh, with West Azerbaijan that had never existed.
No basis
No one knows
for anything.
No one knows what is West Azerbaijan, and that's a narrative that is circulated by Aliyev and Erdogan, by Turkey and Azerbaijan. So putting Artsakh on the same level with West Azerbaijan, he basically, on a subconscious level, sends a signal that Artsakh was something virtual and forget about that. It had never existed. Forget about that. It was a very, very risky statement. On a practical, on a very short-term perspective, this was Pashinyan's offer since September, October 2023. The Artsakh page is closed. We will not raise the issue of return of people of Artsakh to their homes. Instead, you do not raise the issue of West Azerbaijan, of return of West Azeris to their homeland, which is Republic of Armenia, that Azeris called West Azerbaijan. Pashinyan practiced what he preached. He doesn't want this issue to be discussed, to be raised. They do everything to take the issue of return from the international arena, from the international agendas. Remember what the MPs did in Armenia during the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. But what we see from Azerbaijan, we don't see any reciprocity from Azerbaijan. They keep insisting that more than 300,000 Azeris, West Azeris, have to return to West Azerbaijan. And even more, they go beyond, like during their National Academy, a session of their academy. Remember Aliyev calling Sevan Gyoicha, and they say that returning back to Azeri toponyms proves that this land belongs to Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan pursues these long-ranging goals. What Pashinyan says, nothing, because Pashinyan understands that his re-election depends a lot on Azerbaijan policies. And allowing the transit of handful of grain is a signal that Azerbaijan, not a signal, it's a gesture from Azerbaijan to strengthen the position of Pashinyan on the verge of elections.
I think basically his re-election is all he understands. I don't think he understands anything more than that.
No, absolutely. I agree with that.
Arthur, we all thought that for Pashinyan, this issue was closed. Artsakh issue is closed. He's even said that, right? So has he, by raising this issue, suddenly put the topic of the right of return back on the international agenda?
Well, this issue is still on the international agenda. He likes that or he doesn't like that, doesn't matter.
Yeah, we think so, but he doesn't think
so.
There
are international players, countries, and organizations who repeatedly raise this issue. Now he wants to bring it back to kill once and forever. We are not raising this issue. You, Azeris, do not raise that issue yourself. So this is absolutely unacceptable.
Is the topic closed or not closed? Is Pashinyan lying to the Armenian people or is he lying to Aliyev?
Lying to anyone is part of his nature, or is not a dominant trait of his nature. I think he doesn't lie to Armenia. He says that, okay, forget about this issue. Just forget about this issue. That's it. Because, again, the chances of getting re-elected depends on Aliyev's policy and politics these coming 6 months. Okay? Aliyev can play against Pashinyan and for Pashinyan. Aliyev understands that Pashinyan is the best candidate he can have, the best PM he can have in Armenia. And obviously, he will do everything for Pashinyan to succeed. This is something called peace agenda. Okay, look at we established peace, and Pashinyan can stand and say 5 years ago we promised peace. Now we have peace, but this has a price. The peace agenda has a price, and Aliyev squeezes this price from Pashinyan, not from Pashinyan, from Armenia, from Armenians actually.
Right.
So he tightens the knot. But not to such an extent to kill him, to kill Pashinyan, figuratively, of course.
Arthur, a normal leader of Armenia would potentially support the Artsakh Armenians, would support the community, their leadership. They would even strengthen it. A leader like Pashinyan, whatever you may call him, orders a raid of Artsakh offices by the National Security Services. No reason other than presumed economic crimes was given. The witnesses who were there say that they discovered a list of beneficiaries or benefactors who donate to the Artsakh cause and so forth. So just innocuous information. So in the days before, Artsakh's acting president, Asbed Bedrossian, had vowed to continue the vigorous struggle. Coincidence? To keep the rights of Artsaksis to return to their homeland on the international agenda. What do you make of these raids? Why can't they even come up with a fake reason on why they're raiding the premises of the Artsakh office?
I don't believe in coincidences. Obviously, the next day after the parliamentary hearings at the Artsakh embassy of representation in Armenia that I also participated, there were few statements that the government didn't like, that no one liked actually, at least especially one. But most importantly, they cannot tolerate that Asbed Bedrossian spoils the love affair between Pashinyan and Aliyev, because Pashinyan has promised to Aliyev to close this issue, and now Mr. Bedrossian and the other MPs, Artsakh MPs, say that this page is not closed, and we continue struggling to have our right of return respected by Azerbaijan and by international community. And I really wonder, okay, because if Pashinyan says close this issue, this means he is okay with ethnic cleansing, with genocide that was committed by Aliyev. He's okay with that. If he's okay with the crime, this means he shares the responsibility for the crime. And this is a very interesting observation, not observation, okay? A little bit, look to what I'm saying. Why does he blame Samuel Shahramanyan for provoking attack from Azerbaijan against Artsakh? He has to find a scapegoat because if a country does nothing to prevent a genocide, it's guilty for allowing genocide. So Pashinyan can face a court for doing nothing to prevent genocide. That is why he blames the Artsakh leadership. It's not only like a emotional issue. It's not only for a local audience saying that, okay, what I could do, what I could have done nothing because they provoked conflict with Azerbaijan. They were against my proposal to lower the claims for status of Nagorno-Karabakh. But he now denies the fact that it was ethnic cleansing, that was genocide. Because if it was genocide, then what had he done to prevent genocide?
Right. He has
Means that,
responsibility.
yes, this is why his interest and Aliyev's interest to deny that it was a genocide coincide. This is why during the exodus, during which people died, during this exodus, he said that Armenians have left Nagorno-Karabakh voluntarily. And recent statements by Azerbaijan say that the people of Karabakh left Karabakh voluntarily. So what return they are talking about?
You can't get 120 people to vote similarly. And how can you expect 120,000 people to all agree to leave their homeland of 1700 years together and move out? It's just okay. Well, let's not argue. It's nonsensical. Arthur, I want to move on to our final
my
topic
late
today.
father, my late father had a phrase. Okay, you cannot. It's very naive looking for lies in a fairy tale.
Exactly. Exactly. You are an economist. And in the past week, the Lewis Foundation released a report on the first 9 months of economic activity in Armenia. So let's cut to the chase. We already discussed the trade turnover has gone down about 60% in a year over year from 2024 to 2025. There's also a deep underperformance in capital expenditures in the country, meaning that major projects are not being completed. The top area where this is happening, Lewis Foundation named the defense sector, the schools, upgrade and constructions projects, and road improvements and other major infrastructure. We can put a full list in our show notes, podcast.groong.org/episode number. Go there and check it out. We'll also have the link to the full report. And critically, I want to say the state debt has now topped $14 billion. We now have a state debt of $14.1 billion. It's gone up almost 10%, $1.36 billion since the end of 2024. Okay. Arthur, my blood pressure goes up thinking about these numbers. Where's all the money going if it's not going to capital projects? What are they doing with billions of dollars coming into the country?
Well, the state debt is more than $14 billion. It's about $17 billion at the current exchange rate. When we asked this issue to Pashinyan, I asked this question, okay, can you basically try to separate, to understand what would be Armenia's economic performance if Armenia hadn't borrowed that significantly. Okay. So basically the isolate or assess the debt impact of Armenia's economic performance. Neither the Minister of Finance nor Prime Minister couldn't answer to this question. And we will keep insisting, okay, you've borrowed heavily. What is the net outcome? Why did you borrow this intensively? He said, because I needed to buy weapons. I spent $8 billion to buy weapon. Obviously, this is not true. This is not true because he said I needed big money in a very short time. I think he meant that he had to pay Russians for the weapons that he supplied during the 44-day war. Basically, this means he got the weapons from Russia in fall of 2020. Now he borrows from international community, mainly from the West, to pay back the loan to Russians. But we understand that this is not true at all. What Pashinyan does, I think he has very good consultants who are very, very professional in behavioral economics, because I also lecture myself, I lecture behavioral economics. This is hyperbolic discounting when people value the present much more than the future, okay? Because the people say, okay, paved roads. Okay, they like the paved roads. They like this big show that they had yesterday at the Republic Square, where they turn on the lights of the New Year tree. Okay, but how Armenia is going to repay its debt? They cannot continuously finance the debt, chase bad money with good money. They cannot do that continuously. But when people say the future generation have to pay for this loan, I say, no, forget that. It's a fallacy. Today, Armenia's budget for 2026 is 3 trillion drams. 1 trillion dram will leave the country, will leave the government, will leave the budget. About 600 million in interest and 600 billion drams in principal and 400 billion in interest. So 1 in 3 drams goes to service the debt and to pay the maturity. So Pashinyan borrows significantly because he understands that he needs to imitate prosperity. If not this heavy borrowing, the economic growth rate will be like 1%, 2%, 3%. Because all the growth that we witness, or at least the majority of the growth that we witness, is attributed to the borrowing. Okay. And we haven't seen actually, okay, you mentioned roads. He hasn't built any new road, like the second road from Merri to Yerevan, or the road from Selin Gorge, nothing like that. Okay. Having the roads that have traffic that people see every day. That's it. And okay, the extravaganza, the show at Republic Square yesterday.
So how come the opposition is not screaming bloody murder from rooftops about these huge economic shortfall? In America,
Well, we do that.
In America we say it's the economy, stupid, right? We've all heard that. And now the campaign for the 2026 elections is in full swing. But honestly, I'm not hearing the economy as a major topic on the part of the opposition.
Well, yeah, I agree with you.
We're all talking about church. We're all talking. I mean, these are important topics. I'm not
but
dissing it.
basically, if you follow me on social media, I think I have to be more active. But look, okay, this issue of the foreign debt, okay, people speak about future generations. I made this analysis. Again, I want to repeat that. 1 in 3 out of 3 drams that comes into the budget goes out to service law, to pay the interest and for the principal. Second, 1 in 7 adults has bad consumer loan. Imagine that. 1 in 7 has bad loans. So they are chased by the police, they are chased by court martials, they are chased by the banks, but they do not have money. But 136,000 people are not able to pay back their loans, which is up to 250,000 drams.
But But isn't that good for Pashinyan because he has promised to forgive those loans, and they will
Well,
turn into
yeah.
votes for him?
Well, this is interesting thing. He hadn't promised to do that. He said if you re-enter the former job market, then we will pardon the fines, but you still have to pay the interest and the principal. Okay, we'll
Oh, okay.
pardon the fines. We'll channel the not have to pay. Will channel your income tax, the value, the amount of the income tax to service your loan. But as of 1 month ago, I think about 5,000 people have applied only. So this was a miserable failure. A miserable failure because people prefer not to pay with some kind of expectation rather than paying and declare and basically announcing that they work and pay their taxes and pay their at least the principal to the banks. Okay, but imagine, okay, a country where 1 in 7 adults cannot pay its consumer loan. If we add agricultural loans, business loans, mortgages, the number of people will be much higher than 90,000 that we have today. So this is an economic issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I just think that it should be raised more
Agree.
frequently to the attention of the citizens, especially during
Fair
elections.
point. Fair
All right,
point.
let me wrap up our topics. I want to ask each of you
Mhm.
for some thoughts that you might want to share. Arthur, something on your mind?
Yes, I think we listen, we hear from the public, from other political parties saying that this opposition was not able to send Pashinyan home as it promised during the previous elections, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this opposition was the only political force that actively and honestly was trying to stop Pashinyan. But Pashinyan is not the issue that the parliamentary opposition, our faction, can solve alone. This is an issue that touches everyone. Pashinyan is on the verge of creating a cult, a personal cult that we see like Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, Idi Amin, and so on. He calls everyone traitor. He chases everyone that doesn't agree with him. So it's the mission of everyone to stop him. The bells calls for everyone. Okay. Today he fights church. Today he fights Dashnat Sutsun. Today he fights Armenian faction. Tomorrow he will fight anyone who doesn't agree with him. And he's driven by this. He's obsessed with the idea that he's the state himself. And it's everyone's responsibility to stop him.
It's interesting that you mention the word cult because we talk to many analysts who actually believe that there's a certain cultist element to what's going on right now.
I've been telling that he's creating his own church for 5 years. When he spoke about the
Armenian Pashistolic
Messiah
Church.
syndrome. Yeah, when he spoke about the Messiah syndrome, I said he's building his own church.
Right. Hovik, what's on your mind?
So I hope I'm not going to express my original mind this time, but I will read a segment from a Facebook post that I saw, and I will give the author's name in the end because I want people not to be immediately triggered. Uh, and it's a very long 10-minute read, but I will just read a segment. Nikol Pashinyan has understood that he has already been branded a guilty party and a traitor. The public consensus and the mandate for that exists, and the church will carry it out by sanctifying the people. Why the church? Because that is one of its historical missions. Nikol Pashinyan is drowning in the prospect. Moreover, he has found himself in the purgatory of history, realizing that both his past and his future are problematic, and he makes even bigger mistakes. Meanwhile, Catholicos of all Armenians, Garigin II, is living through what is perhaps his happiest period, a man who was considered pro-regime and labeled as a courtier, is now becoming a historical figure who defies the authorities' persecution. All of Garigin II's earthly mistakes and sins fade into the background under the glow of this historical mission with every blow from the authorities. The harder they strike Garigin II, the more he will shine in history. Because between the Catholicos and Nikol Pashinyan, people have already chosen who the traitor is, the traitor who turned out to be the devil. And the proof is his movement against the church, even for non-believers. I will let you read the rest. It's by Mikhail Minasyan, December 7, 2025. Anyway, it was a very interesting read, and regardless of what you think about him, so I would urge you to go and find it and read it.
Yeah, I was going to say amen, and I was going to say I didn't write that, but okay. Thank you very much, Arthur, for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And since this is probably the last time we talk in 2025, Happy New Year. Շնորհավոր նոր տարի եւ սուրբ ծնունդ.
Happy New Year to you too. We hope that a new sun will rise.
I don't know what I can I don't know what I can wish for 2025 to have more, but I know I want something less, or some less people in my life.
Okay, take care.
Okay, gentlemen. Take care.
Okay.
Have a nice
and
day.
It's not the extra weight. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was our weekend review show recorded on December 15, 2025. We've been talking with Mr. Arthur Khachatryan, who is an MP from the Hayastan Dashink Armenia Alliance and a member of the ARF, Khachatryan. In the past, he has held government posts such as Deputy Minister of Territorial Administration and Development, Governor of Shirag, Minister of Culture, and he is an economist by trade. For more information, of course, you can go to our show notes, podcast.groong.org/episode number, and check out a lot more. We'll also put all the links to the articles we're referencing in the show notes.
Folks, we're still seeing some people who are persistently and maybe to spite us, not subscribing to our channel. So if you're one of those people, it's okay. We don't know about you. I mean, we don't know your name, but please subscribe so that we can enjoy your patronage even more, and like, comment, and share, so that you can help us fight the algorithmic wars that we're engaged in. And if you're feeling extra generous, of course, there's always the donation option, which is podcasts.groong.org/donate. Become a Lahmacun luminary and illuminate your life with our news, or you can just become a Surge sponsor, and either way,
or
it's all
a Harissa
appreciated.
humanitarian.
I forgot about that one. That's for the ultra rich donors, but yes, that's also possible.
Ultra rich, the people who can afford what, $25 or $10 a month.
Yeah, I mean, today, even like I think in some places in the United States, you can't even buy coffee for that amount. So, we should upgrade our tiers. Anyways,
well, you remember when we were setting these up, we had a category that was $10,000 a month, and then we thought, what if some crazy person actually does that and they decide to own us, and we didn't do it.
Yeah, no, that was a joke. We wanted to do that as a joke, but yeah, my principle is actually I would never accept that, because I don't want a single person to have so much a stake. But
unless
of course,
we have hundreds of them.
Yeah, I mean, if ever, definitely. So anyway, I mean, that's my personal opinion. So thank you everyone for sticking with us so long. I'm Hovik Manucharyan from Yerevan, Armenia.
And I'm Asbed Bedrossian in Los Angeles. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Have a great week.